Hi, I'm Matt from HockeyReviews.ca, and this is the CCM Trigger 6 Pro hockey stick review. Now, I grabbed all of these other sticks here just because whenever I do a trigger review, I like to bring out the family because this is my biggest family of sticks that I have, and there's a lot of them, as you can see. And Trigger line has been dear to me since the very first one I ever tried. I really liked them, and so I find that's important to kind of point out when I do like reviews of these, especially when it was a Trigger 5 Pro, because that was a stick that I hated and wanted to get away from as soon as possible. So we'll talk about the Trigger 6 Pro in this review. Now, before we begin all of that, this video wouldn't have happened without the help of Hockey Supremacy. So Hockey Supremacy worked with me in order to get a Trigger 6 Pro so I could do a review and make the content and everything. Check out the links to Hockey Supremacy in the description. Clicking that link and making a purchase gives me a kickback so I can do more stuff like this and make more videos. Otherwise, support me on Patreon and buy me a coffee. Everything through there, again, comes right back into the channel so I can keep buying more gear so I can do more content and make more videos and do actual reviews. Now, while we begin on this, I'm not going to do kind of a full check-in and kind of a re-review of this stick, kind of like what I did with the Bauer Hyperlite and the Flylight, because my comments on this stick haven't changed. I still don't like it. It's too light, and the balance was way off. And the other reason I had this stick right here, which was the Trigger 4 Pro, is because these are the sticks that I did the shooting videos of. So the one thing about this Trigger 4 Pro, and I shot really poorly with it in this video, it is actually longer. So this is a length of a full normal CCM stick. I cut the Trigger 6 and Trigger 5 Pro down. So that is about how much I cut down. It throws me off massively on ice now. And the reason I cut them all down now is because basically every other company is a little bit smaller than what CCM does. CCM's always kind of the longest. This is directly how much smaller the Bauers are, and as well as True, and I think Warrior as well. So everything is smaller than what the CCM ones are. So it takes a while for me to adjust between a CCM stick and one of those other companies. So my solution has simply just been to cut down the CCM sticks. I'm 6'3" off the ice, so me cutting this stick down kind of makes it not the ideal height, but I have better stick handling when I cut it down anyway, so I just do that so everything else is an easier transition. So that's what I did with the Trigger 6 Pro. I didn't do it on the Trigger 4 Pro because it's not a stick I use anymore, so I don't really find a reason for me to cut it down, so I'll just leave it as is. Now, the very first thing we'll talk about in this video, in this review, is the aesthetics of the stick, which by all means is not important at all and doesn't matter at all, but I'm going to talk about it anyways. CCM has always used kind of the green look on their Ribcore sticks, but the green has changed significantly over time. Originally, most of the stick was kind of this like army green looking color, and obviously you see a bit of that neon right there, but the green was all over this stick, and you can see it kind of right here and everything. And now it's completely changed where it's this very bright neon, which is a totally different shade of green. It looks more similar to what Bauer did with the ADV, but I'm not saying they're copying it. I'm just saying it's more of a similar color, which is probably just a more popular color in general, but it looks good. And what I really like CCM did on the new line is basically got rid of the entire bottom section of the triggers and how like green this was. I know in the last gen, they all kind of had different color, like the corresponding color down here. So yellow for tax, red for jet speed, and the green here. But I like them removing this. It never really looked that clean and really like a pro level stick. It kind of always looked gimmicky and almost like one of the cheaper like youth sticks. So getting rid of that, I think, is a huge improvement. They honestly got rid of a lot of the green. Now it's just basically on the logos themselves, and you can see like stick tack grip, and right here a little bit on the side right there with the number, and that's basically it. It's very minimal green all around, whereas the old one had a lot more, especially on the bottom there, but it also had it on this asymmetrical kind of taper logo right there, as you can see. Also had it on the inside. I kind of liked this because it was pretty unique, because it really did a good job of showing off that unique taper design, as you can see how it goes in so much. So I kind of liked how that was there, but still kind of does look cheesy. I do like the new look and how it's much more cleaner all around, and like you can see the chrome there and the green over here, and the comparison really of like the logos is night and day, as you can see here, where the new one is kind of this gray stealth look with a pretty interesting sheen to it, whereas the old one was that crazy green and almost like, honestly, kind of looked like Call of Duty Modern Warfare type stuff going on there. So I do really love this CCM logo, as you can see right here, and it continues on the Trigger 6 Pro. It was on the bottom portion of the shaft on the Trigger 5 Pro, as you can see right there. And it's everywhere on the Trigger 6, where it's on the Ribcore text right here. It's on this asymmetrical taper logos right there. It's on the other side right here. Not right there, but right there. And I do really like how CCM has kind of done the logo though. While I like the shinier version on this one, I do like how you can see like the overlay. You can still see the weave through it, as you can see right there when the light hits it, but you can see how it's just kind of slightly different, transparent cover, and you can't see those lines through it either. So a very interesting graphic choice there, and it is on the inside as well, whereas the old one was that much smaller green taper look, and this one is the full logo. But again, kind of hard to see, but I gotta say, I absolutely love this asymmetrical taper part right here, and the actual ribcore. The look of this is super clean. It looks really, really good, and very minimal amount of kind of green overall. And while I liked the green, I think this is a much cleaner stick and it looks a lot better, and it doesn't look like a youth stick like the old one did. One thing I'm slightly sad to see go away, but I sort of understand it, is they still have their information on here, Trigger 6 Pro, nanolite carbon, and some tech in there, but gone is the weight. It's a nice little thing, but I get why they did that. So my stick wasn't 365 grams, but it was like 370, then you cut it and it gets lower, so kind of makes sense. But there's always variances in weight, which I'll talk about a little bit later. Another thing that is totally not important at all, but I'm going to talk about it, is CCM does have this little interesting kind of, it's a peel, sticker peel, so you can see how now my P92 or 29 logo is going off, and you can kind of put it back on. So the reason that is because you can kind of print on your own text right here. So I did this on the Trigger 5 Pro, and that is like a custom thing CCM's offering at retails. And by custom, I mean you literally go into a retailer, and most or authorized retailers should be able to have this little printing thing. It's a little gun you stick on, and it goes like this, and it's like a label maker on just this right here. It's very minimal. Honestly, I wish they offered custom sticks, which I'll talk about in the future, but that's kind of a cool little thing right there that you can do. One other thing that CCM has done nicely on this stick is change the grip, and one thing that we're going to be doing forward is, when we talk about stick reviews, I'm going to talk about the grip itself. So here's an example of Bauer's like 3D style grip over here. And Bauer has a really good grip on their sticks, and this kind of texture you can feel all the way down. So we're going to use a glove that I am going to keep forever, which is this Bauer 1S. It's a Pro Stock glove, and it's a single layer palm. It's a Pro Stock glove. And the reason we're going to use this is because, again, this glove isn't going anywhere, and it's really good to feel through like texture on sticks and everything. Bauer is honestly the best right now at the retail level in terms of how stick grips are. CCM is getting better, and that's why I wanted to call this stick out specifically. In the past, CCM has done some pretty interesting things where you can see this like square textured all along this stick. And I loved this. I loved how it was a little bit textured, not crazy, but it was a really interesting design, and they were pretty unique when they used it. They got away from that completely, and honestly, their textured grips were kind of disappointing for a while, and their grips are a little disappointing, but we'll talk about that in a second too. And like for the example, this one on the Trigger 5 Pro, like all these little things are kind of like, they look like fake textured, to be honest. I was really hoping that they were textured, and they were not. And this stick was just totally smooth all the way through. But CCM has redeemed themselves with the Super Tax and this stick. So you can see how the light reflects on these graphics, and the graphics definitely do add texture all the way through the stick. The one thing, it does stop on the text like this. It doesn't stop down here, but it does stop down there too. You're not really going to put your hands down here anyway, so this part really doesn't matter because none of this spot is textured. Right here it's textured, and up here it's textured. It doesn't have it on the bottom. You can see where kind of the graphic ends and that textured piece ends, so don't wrap it all the way, which is fine, but you do see that you can see it right there and going through. And the most important thing is how you can really feel it on your hands. And honestly, I got to get rid of this thing because I can notice it right away, and it's bothering me whenever my hand goes up there. So we now no longer have what flexes is. This is a great feeling in the hands. It's still minimal compared to what the Bauer one is with like the full texture, but this is so much nicer than before. I love textured sticks, and the reason I love that is because when you're moving your hand down, it just gives your brain and your body kind of a little idea of how far it's going, because you can really feel how much it's going. It's not a big thing. It's not super important, but it's a nice feeling piece. And honestly, the textured on grips kind of show the level of detail and quality companies are going to go. This grip isn't amazing, to be totally honest, but the texture is a nice move there, and I think CCM is getting better with their grips. The reason I say it isn't amazing is because it still flakes like crazy. So you can see how it chips like that. I think I got this stick on the ice 4 times before my area got shut down again. You can see how that grip just like peels straight through and chips straight through. My Hyperlite has had a lot more usage. The marks don't look nearly that bad. And for example, this has been basically my most used CCM stick in a while. You can see just the texture and the grip just gets chipped away so much and so far. And it's kind of their paint all over gets that. And obviously, if your stick is being used and everything, it's going to chip, it's going to flake, that's going to happen. But CCMs, it happens more than like any other stick I've ever used, and significantly more. And while we look at the Bauer and there is chipping, it's considerably less and doesn't go through as far, or doesn't seem like it goes through as far as like the CCM ones do, where it like really like almost feels like you could flake off layers. That's not really the case with the Bauers. But with that said, CCM has made solid improvements with this, especially the grip itself. Whereas like this FD3 Pro also had no grip, textured grip on it at all. This one is a solid improvement. So I mentioned this stick has a P29 curve, and I'm not going to review a curve in here because obviously it's personal preference. But what I will kind of review and talk about is the curve options. And this will kind of lead down to the customization part of this stick. So the curve options on here is just standard for CCM. They still don't have a P29 max. They still don't have a P88 max. They still don't have a P28 max. Warrior has the max. Bauer has the max. Other companies are using like max blades or just different curve options. The only one CCM really has that's kind of different is that P90 TM. That's disappointing to me because you can't really get what you want. If I were to get this stick, I would want a P29 max because I like that extra height. CCM's kind of limiting that. They also do this thing where they have the custom name bars, which is kind of cool for especially from a retail setting, because if like kids want their own name or whatever, that's kind of interesting. You can't do something like this and actually order a custom stick, but you can't get that custom grip that you want. You can't do custom colors. You can't do like pro curves, and you can't change the blades or anything in there. So that is pretty disappointing to me. So CCM has a stick fitter in their retail stores. So you take a couple shots and the app on the video records your shooting and then suggests a stick based on like the variables you put in. It could be better and it could be like a custom route, and I kind of wish they went down that way. While I like the stick and it's one of my favorite sticks, there are a few things I would change differently on that. One is I would get a more textured grip, but the other thing is that blade is what I would change. And the other thing about that is, which we're kind of gonna slide into here, is the construction of the blade and the pinginess of the blade. So all of CCM's blades are honestly kind of pingy compared to Bauer. The Hyperlite is really the only blade that to me feels anything close to what CCM is offering, and that is the pingiest Bauer blade I've ever used. This honestly feels slightly less pingy than the Hyperlite is, but like not considerably so. CCM tells you that it's like softer here and gets stiffer on the toe for actual stiffness and everything, so it will open up or whatever, and then it's stiff on the toe. But the blade still does feel pingy. I do talk about the blade pinginess a bit in the Hyperlite review video, so I won't go down that whole route for this video specifically, but we'll have a video in the near future where I actually talk about what blade pinginess is, and we kind of cut up a couple blades. But it's basically just like the foams that are used in there to talk about blade feel and dampening. To me, this stick isn't perfect because of this blade feel. I wish it was softer. I prefer soft blade, just my thing. So this doesn't really tick those boxes for me in that sense, because this one is a little pingier than something that I would prefer. When we talk about blade feel, kind of also have to go into like stick handling and passing and stuff like that, especially specifically how it feels. Again, I prefer a more dampened blade, but that's personal preference. Passing on this though was solid. And one of the issues some people have with low kick sticks, and I kind of felt it when I go down a flex a lot more, is hard passes either bend basically here when you're receiving them, so the stick feels like it's flexing under you. That happens whenever I go to a 75 of anything, except for Sherwood Code, because that thing doesn't flex at all. But this was totally fine. I can accept hard passes with this without it flexing under me, which is always a good thing. I can make hard passes with this without the pass turning into a shot. Obviously, you want to make hard passes, and I do make hard passes that basically are shots, but you'd never want it to feel the stick kick and to kind of make that uncontrollable a bit too much. I know exactly where my passes are going when I'm making this. I know how it feels. I know how hard I have to pass it, and I know how to differentiate it between a shot and a hard pass, and it works wonderfully for that. I still wish it was more dampened for puck feel, but again, personal preference, and like passing on this was fine, and I didn't have to really adjust anything with it. It stayed the way it was. Even if it's a low kick, I could still transition from this to a non-low kick with no issues, and never really felt hindered by it, or never had to hesitate when making a play because of the stick, because of the kick point, and because of the flex. It felt perfect and exactly how I wanted it. So stick handling with this stick was very solid and I had no issues whatsoever. I have experienced things in the past with certain sticks, especially low kick sticks, where when you are stick handling, you can kind of feel the bottom flexing on you. Generally, you can just kind of go up a flex to mitigate that. But for this one, It was totally fine all around, and I had zero issues whatsoever using it, and the balance kind of plays a good part in that as well. Personally, like I mentioned over and over again, I would prefer a bit of a more dampened blade for stick handling puck feel, but overall it's fine and it works, and that is just some of the characteristics of the stick. And compared to the Trigger 5 Pro, where because that blade balance really felt like there was no real blade on the stick, I often kind of lost where the puck was going to be or where the stick was going to be because of that balance issue, where that is totally gone on the Trigger 6 Pro. So that's a big improvement for stick handling for me. Again, by all means, a personal preference thing, but I really feel like CCM could go down that custom route and offers like different blades, pro blades, and do different blade constructions. Bower, it depends on which My Bower you get. This one was a pretty standard My Bower one. It wasn't the Pro Custom, but you can change the blades on their sticks, where this one you're kind of just stuck exactly what they have. And that's kind of disappointing because I wish they had more options and offerings for that. With that said though, CCM having this stick being that much bigger than all of the other retail sticks is a huge thing. And someone who's taller, like me, who's 6'3", that is really the stick length I should use. So more people probably won't need plugs, which is a good thing. And if you go up to the 95 flex, they get extended even more. So again, CCM putting that in there is a solid thing, but it's just their customization for these and like the options for the blades, I think is a little disappointing. Now, one thing that I don't always talk about that much, because unless it's something I really notice, is the shaft shape. And this stick is pretty unique because it has that asymmetrical design. Definitely feel it in your hand. Now, the difference between Vapor Stick, which is just a rounded corners, but kind of flat all the way through, and it just feels like it's a rounded corner shaft. The triggers feel totally different. And specifically, they do have that asymmetrical shape, and on the bottom you can see this, but your hands aren't really there. So the big difference is on this side of the shaft, where this part feels like it comes out because it's convex, where the other side is concave. So we switch this around and you can see how it dips in a little bit there, and it's more pronounced the lower you go on the shaft, and your hands are definitely holding down here. So you still notice it down here because your hands are holding down here. Now when you go extreme all the way down here, your hands obviously aren't really ever going to be down here, but you still notice a little bit of it down here compared to the other side, which definitely feels like it bows outwards a bit right there. So it's a very interesting shape, and it's definitely something you notice, especially like when you're running your hands here. You definitely feel like this part of your hand is really in that concave part, and this part is on the convex part. And when you hold it with your bottom hand, it ends up like this. So your fingers fit in there really nice, and then this part kind of bows out into your hand. You definitely do notice this shaft shape when you're playing with it. I'm not saying it's a bad thing or anything, but I always notice that I can always feel my fingers kind of in there and kind of this part fitting out. It's a nice feel, and it's a nice interesting implementation, and I like that this is an offering on CCM. So when you look at this part, which is the piece that's cut off of the stick to shorten it, you can definitely see this side is definitely the concave side, and this part is the more flattened side. This is at the very top where this convex part is kind of minimizing. You can feel it more down here where your hand is here, then it feels like it flattens out a bit at the top. But the total tell for this, and to see how it really feels, is when you put your hand or fingers on the inside, you can really feel that bump right there on the inside of this, where this side just feels very flat, and you can still feel a little bit of a bump, but it's nothing like what this one is at all, which is very significant. So that is a good kind of example of what this shaft shape is and how it feels. It shows the thinness or thickness of the shaft, and it is pretty thin considering this isn't like an ADV stick, where Bower ADVs and the super lightweight sticks are usually very thin with the carbon makeup of the shaft. This one is not one of those sticks, and it is pretty thin all around, so that's impressive. Now, durability, obviously I have a hard time talking about durability with this stuff because I don't use sticks enough to really talk about, especially before a review, because I'm always switching different sticks to actually do reviews on. So unfortunately I can't comment much on there besides the paint chips and the grip chips that I have already seen in my past experiences, which have only been positive for durability on CCM sticks. But again, I unfortunately can't really comment on that much. Now, before jumping into the weight of the stick and the shooting of the stick, which is what I know everyone wants, this video happened with help of Hockey Supremacy. So make sure you check them out in the description. Clicking that link and making a purchase of any hockey equipment gives me a kickback, helps support the channel, and it helps show that them helping me with this review supports them as well. So it'd be greatly appreciated if you do that. So huge thanks to Hockey Supremacy for helping with this. Again, check them out. Now we are on to the weight of this stick. And this is where the Trigger 5 Pro comes into play a lot. And with weight, it's more balance. This stick is the perfect example of where weight isn't the only concern, and chasing a number is a bad thing. This stick, as you can see, was supposed to be 365 grams. I think mine was 370 before being cut. So cutting it would have been about 365. And honestly, the stick is just too light. And specifically, it's too light. It's the blade is too light. When I hold this stick, it feels like there's nothing at all in the blade. And when I'm using it, I would just lose puck space off of it. And I would it felt like the blade would always pop off the ice and people would always stick with me way easier than I was expecting, just because the balance of this stick was poor, in my opinion. It was not blade heavy enough, so the balance was too high on the stick itself. So I know I wasn't the only person who had issues with the Trigger 5 Pro, especially in terms of weight. I know a bunch of people that use these personally who are like really good hockey players that can shoot, and they hated this stick because of the weight, and they instantly went back to something else, basically. And everyone was the same thing. They said the balance just feels way off. It's too light. This stick is no longer advertising 365 grams. I think they're at, I can't remember. I'll put it up on here which they're actually advertising this as. Mine came in at 403. Now that is with the plug, and I'll say that because I know people from True would say you have to take it out to measure it, but people are going to leave the plug in, so it matters. And on top of that, that was pre-cut. So that was with this part off itself. Cut this off. This ended up weighing 4 grams. You get under 400 grams of weight. That is not the 380 or 375 that they're advertising, but it's within tolerances. Sticks will always kind of be all over the place, and it's just manufacturing tolerances. So honestly, it's fine. This stick being like 398 after that weight, or whatever my bad math is, ends up being the same as the Hyperlite, which some people will say is disappointing. But when using it, this stick feels amazingly balanced. And when using it, it never feels heavy. And that's kind of the important part, and why I think the weights really don't matter. It's all about balance. And True was kind of pushing this for the swing weight thing, and then they went the whole weight direction for the Project X. This is kind of back to the swing weight. This isn't needed to be a 360 or 350 gram stick to be impressive. The stick itself can be impressive. The balance of this is fantastic. The weight feels much more balanced towards the blade, so it doesn't feel like you're skating without a blade, which was a problem with the Trigger 5 Pro. I always felt like I was just using a ringette stick. The blade kind of felt like it wasn't there. This feels like it has enough weight to the blade. And when I've been using it, I've been very happy with my stick handle. I've been happy with my poke checking and pulling pucks back and stuff. It doesn't feel too light. It feels exactly what I want, and I'm happy with the use. I'm very confident with it. I have to say I'm really happy CCM kind of went the other direction, whether it be for durability reasons or just to get the balance point right. Adding that extra weight on this stick has really brought it back in line with what the other Ribcore sticks were. And that makes me really happy because I can keep on using this stick, whereas I dropped the Trigger 5 Pro second I was done with that review. You can get used to sticks that weigh less and sticks that are balanced different. You can obviously get used to, you can get used to anything. You can give someone a wood stick, they can get used to it. It doesn't mean that that's the right way to go. And for me, I use so many different sticks that when something's so off balance like this, it throws everything off, and I use something else off and I instantly love that other thing. I'm gonna keep using that other thing. Now, if you bought it and you have to stick with it because you spent that money, I get it. This is way better balance, and it's what I want more. I can see a lot more people sticking with these than Trigger 5 Pros. So when we have some shooting footage here, there's a few things that I want to point out. Number one, the Trigger 4 Pro is a longer stick, so it really screwed up. And number two, my hockey's been shut down for a month. I haven't really had any time to do any hockey related stuff. That's why there's been a lack of content. That also led to me just losing everything. I'm not a great hockey player to begin with, and I'm really cold right now, so all my shooting was honestly hot garbage. Accuracy was terrible. I want to put that as a caveat because this shooting part isn't me showing how good this stick is. It's just B-roll. That's it. Now, the one thing that made me really disappointed about going away from the CCM Trigger 5 Pro stick, because of the balance and how I didn't like it, is how well it shot. And more or less how well CCM sticks were shooting. The FT3 Pro, I feel, was a whole new revolution for CCM. The triggers were always pretty good, but once that FT3 Pro came out, all their sticks just went to a next level. This one, I didn't feel like it was as big as an upgrade compared to from the 4, because I still really liked how the Trigger 4 Pro shot. This was more of a weight thing, but it was still a good shooting stick. I just didn't like it that much, and I felt like the balance really hurt me with it. When we go to the Trigger 6 Pro, I now have that balance I'm comfortable with, and the shooting is just awesome. This is, simply put, the best low kick shooting stick I've ever used. Again, I love the previous triggers, but it's way better than the Hyperlite for shooting, and the balance is on point as well. This stick is awesome for shots. The release is fantastic. When I'm on the ice with this and I shot it, the very first shot I took, it was as a cannon, and I shot it, and my producer was looking at me, and both of us were like, wow, that's a stick. I can shoot with that. And it makes me want to shoot more because I'm so happy with how this stick shoots. It's so easy to release. The puck just flies off the stick. The kick is amazing. It is so solid and so good that even with some of the downfalls that make this not like my favorite stick, it is so good that I keep wanting to go back to, and I will keep going back to it, and I'll keep using it. It is awesome. It is phenomenal shooting. Obviously, this is the low kick stick, so slap shots aren't like the idea of it, and like those hard wind up shots. It's all about quick release, and it does that really, really well. I don't ever really take slap shots when I'm doing stuff. I took a few with this, and it was just whatever. Tax is way better for that. Supreme's way better for that, and I think the Nexus is better for that too. So all of those are basically better for that shot, but this for quick release, quick snap, quick wrist shots is just phenomenal, and I absolutely love it. CCM is honestly just killing it right now with their sticks, especially in terms of performance, like shot performance. This thing shoots amazing. The FT3 Pro shot amazing. I haven't used the FT4 Pro, so I can't talk about it. The AS3 Pro shot amazing. Like, they're on a level above everything else, and it's very impressive, and they deserve a ton of credit for it. And again, I hated the 5 Pro purely for the balance reasons. This thing, balance is right there, and the shot is back. This is gonna be one of my go-to sticks, and it is like, it just shoots so good, and they deserve so much credit for it. Overall, this stick is simply awesome. It's not my favorite stick, and it might not be my like permanent go-to stick on the market, simply because of the blade construction. It's a little too pingy for my taste. I wish it was more dampened. If this thing had a Nexus blade on it or ultrasonic blade on it, I would be using that all the time. That'd be my favorite stick. But this stick has gotten a lizard skin on it, which means it's a permanent fixture, and this thing is going to be used a lot. I don't put lizard skins or tacky mac or butt ends on sticks I don't plan on keep on using. You can see this Trigger 5 Pro always had this cheap tennis over grip because it was never worth it to me. I wasn't sticking around with it. This thing I'm sticking around with. It's going to be one of my go-tos. I'm looking forward to being done with my stick reviews in the recent time so I can keep going back to this all the time. CCM deserves a ton of credit for reversing the, I think, mistake they made last time going too light. They went back to what worked for them for this. Added a little bit of weight. Balance is just right there and really good. Love this stick. Love using this stick. I'm happy to be back in a Trigger. That's a lot of praise for me because I really hated this. Now, people have asked me to do a Hyperlite comparison, and I'm not really going to do that. I unfortunately don't have time to do that, and I don't think it's really worthwhile. So I'll say this. When I reviewed the Hyperlite, I said I have a hard time recommending this at the full price when you could get a stick like Pro Stock sticks, which you can get all these cool grips and custom features on, and you get a pretty solid stick that's comparable for kind of shooting as is Hyperlite. Would I recommend that with the CCM, a company like Pro Stock Sticks that sells stuff at a cheaper price? Yes and no. Obviously, you have to find what your budget is. Unfortunately, I can't review the Trigger 6 of this. I only bought the Trigger 6 Pro because I did still have to buy this stick. So I can't comment what the cheaper versions of these and how good they are for the competition. This stick is offering something that I feel like no one else on the market really does, and that is just simply the best shot performance on the market there is. So you can't just go to another company and get something kind of equivalent. This thing's going to shoot better because it just does. That's kind of it. Like, I recommend this stick because I can't replace it no matter what I use. So obviously you have to find what's in your budget and what works for you. But for me, and this stick is simply the best shooting low kick stick there is, and you can't replace it with something else. You might get a better dollar for value type thing, but you're not getting a better performing stick somewhere else. So that's all I can really say about that. And simply ends up being, I do absolutely recommend this stick if you want a low kick stick. Thank you very much for watching this video. Hopefully it was helpful. Remember to subscribe to me on YouTube, follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Links are in the description. Huge thanks to Hockey Supremacy for helping me out making this video. They helped me in getting the stick. It's greatly appreciated. Please show your support to them. Click the link in the description. Follow that link to their site. Any hockey purchase gives me a kickback to help support the channel. Also shows that I'm useful to them from making this video and all this content, so it'd be greatly appreciated that way. The more people do that, or the more people tell them that you want to see me review stuff and make purchases through that, lets them know that I'm someone to support, and it'd be greatly appreciated because I'd love to do more stick reviews and more gear reviews, and that's one way to do that. Also, if you want to support the channel, check out links at Patreon and Buy Me a Coffee. Everything through there comes right back in the channel so I can keep buying more gear and making more actual reviews and just not marketing reviews. Thank you very much for watching, and take it easy.
You're watching HockeyReviews.ca.